Well, first words out of Jesus' mouth relative to kingdom living, relative to what it really means to be a Christian. In fact, relative to what it really means to live life and be happy. First words, here they are. Blessed are the what? Poor in spirit. For they, in the Greek it's emphatic, they alone will enter the kingdom of heaven. And from that we learned a couple of weeks ago that the people, and only the people who by God's grace have been given the ability to see their own moral and spiritual bankruptcy and stop justifying their sin and rationalizing it. And only the people who find themselves saying, listen, instead of saying, and stop saying, I should say, well, I'm not such a bad person. Compared to these other people, I'm fine. I mean, I'm doing pretty well. The people who stop doing that, well, they're the ones who will really be blessed, said Jesus, because they, and they alone, actually see themselves as they really are, at least in God's sight, which is a sign, ultimately, that God's working in them. If we are really broken in that way, we really see our spiritual bankruptcy, well, then we're blessed, because that's a gift of God. That doesn't come naturally to the human heart. The human heart naturally says, no, I'm fine. I'm basically a pretty good person. Occasionally do some wrong things. And those somewhat stunning words were immediately followed up by Jesus' second words, which I think are in some ways equally stunning to describe the real kingdom, and it's these. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed, how well off are those who not only see their sin and moral and spiritual bankruptcy, but actually mourn over it, whose grief over their bankrupt spiritual and moral condition is so extreme, so passionate. It begins in the heart, it overtakes their entire person, and then ultimately it outwardly manifests itself. It comes bursting out. They begin to get out here what's going on in here. They stop pretending. They actually just get real with people. They come to church and say, I'm not perfect. Here's the real deal. We are having trouble in our marriage. We are having trouble in our circumstance. And they get real about that. And they get real with God about that, more importantly. Which brings us to the third beatitude. And again, this is our primary text this morning.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth, or the land, as we'll talk about in a little while. Okay, well, the meek. Let's deal with this issue of meekness a little bit, shall we? Because once again, Jesus is saying what? In the Greek, all of that is emphatic again. So he's saying only people who are meek inherit the earth, inherit the land. Only those who display these kingdom attributes of brokenness and mourning and meekness are actually in the kingdom. That's the reality of that statement. So let's start by asking a few questions that I trust will, Lord willing, help us emerge from this process this morning with a few answers. First question is this: who are the meek? Who are they? I want you to think about that for a minute. Think about that in terms of who you might consider the meek to be. Who are the meek in your family? Who are the meek amongst your friends or your co-workers? Who would you say are the meek people in this church? Who would you say that is, I wonder? What does a meek person act like? What do they look like? Well, I'm sure you have some images about that. I'm sure you have some impressions already in your mind as to what a meek person is and what they act like and what they do. But here's what I want to do this morning. I want to help you get to the real honest answers, not the Sunday school answers, not the church service answer. You know, in church we might say, oh, well, the meek, that's a very noble attribute. I think we all should be meek, really. But the fact of the matter is, we may not feel so great about being meek. Let me show you why. For example, if you were an employer and you were interviewing someone for a job, and the word on the street about this particular individual is, well, they're smart, very qualified, and they're meek. Would you hire them? Maybe if you're a florist, you would hire them? Or would you hire them as the sales manager for your stock brokerage firm? Okay, how about this? If you overheard people talking in the hallway at church, and they were talking about you, and they were saying something to the effect of, he's nice, or she's nice, but they're very meek. Would you feel good about that? Would you like that? Or would you say, what do you mean I'm meek? What do you mean by that? All right, how about a blind date? Would you go on a blind date with someone who was described to you as their primary attribute being they're very meek? Would you be excited about meeting that person? Would you marry him? How about this? Would you follow someone who's meek? Would you trust someone who's meek? Would you go into battle with someone who's meek? If you were in battle, would you want the meekest guy in your battalion in your foxhole when the enemy hit? Probably not. Why? Because if we're honest with ourselves and others, well, we see meek as kind of weak, mousy, maybe nice, but truth is not very strong, maybe friendly, but really not that great in a crisis. I would probably go to a museum with a meek person. Oh, those are lovely paintings from Monet. But I'm not sure I would want to go to the Super Bowl with a guy who's meek. I would probably fish in the pond in the backyard for sunfish with someone who's meek, just kind of tossing in a nice sunny day like today. But I'm not so sure on first glance I would want to go spearfishing in the Gulf of Mexico for barracuda with a shark in the water with a meek guy. And I think the truth of the matter is, if we're honest with ourselves, that's kind of the impression we might have of this word. And you know, it's probably understandable to some degree. I mean, the fact of the matter is, generally speaking, when we think of meek in terms of going into battle or a tough situation or in a family circumstance or a church circumstance or a business circumstance where things like courage and conviction are necessary, generally speaking, I don't think we really want a meek guy leading the charge. That's just kind of our mindset. You know, the fact of the matter is, it's probably understandable because the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of our English word meek, well, this is it. Listen.
Meek, mild, submissive, soft, gentle, deficient in courage.
Okay, great. So what do we have here? Blessed are those who are soft and deficient in courage. Oh, that's excellent. That's what I want to be. Is that what Jesus was saying? No. In fact, that's just another reason why studying our Bibles instead of just reading them is important. That's why sometimes you do have to look up the Greek word, to be honest with you, because that is not the essence of this word that Jesus is using there in Matthew 5:5. So let's do a little more work here. Pull out your outlines and look at section 2a. Meek. The Greek word for meek is praus. The root meaning of that word in its raw, basic, out-of-context form means simply this: mild, tender, or gentle. All right, so you're thinking, well, that's not a whole lot of help there, because on first glance, that's not very different from our English definition. But as I trust you beginning to get the feel of, if you haven't already, the fact of the matter is, as we go through the study of the book of Matthew and we look at these Greek words throughout this process, I think you're probably noticing that, first of all, there's often very many different words, sometimes 5 or 10 different Greek words for the one English word that we have. And each Greek word has a subtle shade of difference that really tells you a lot more about that word, and such is the case in this instance. It's really not so much, though, in the dictionary definition or even in the Greek dictionary definition of this word where we begin to get a flavor for this word. Now, where we really begin to pick up on what this word means is in its usages, for example, in Scripture or in classical Greek during the time of Jesus. For example, look back on your outlines. Praus was a word that was used in classical Greek to describe, check this out, a soothing medicine and a gentle breeze. Well, all of a sudden, this praus attribute is starting to look a little more attractive. I mean, I still have some issues with this meek is weak thing, but even though I'm not exactly aspiring to be meek yet, at least now it doesn't feel quite as wimpy, quite as unattractive as it did a few minutes ago. No, in fact, blessed are those who are a soothing medicine and a gentle breeze. Yeah, that's not so bad if you think about it. Real kingdom people, people who truly love the Lord, become for others like a soothing medicine and a gentle breeze. Okay, I think I can cope with that, but let's dig a little deeper. In fact, here's what I'd like to do. While we didn't go through the Beatitudes in the word picture series that we produced, I did actually do a two-part series on just this word, meekness. So I want to show you two clips from that series, the first of which is on this issue of being a gentle breeze and a soothing medicine. Now, again, I'm doing that primarily because of the second clip, but this one, even this, the setting of it, gives you an idea of what this word means in a way that's, I think, a little more, well, better illustration for you. Watch.